Kia ora, no mai, haere mai, welcome. I'm Jessie. I'm going to be your weaver for this session, just sitting in the background, pulling things together. And we've got James as our tech support person. Thanks, James. And our kōrero starter for this session is going to be Nitish Verma. Give us a wave, Nitish. He's going to be chatting about reporting from the Grassroots. Just wanted to share a reminder that we've got a collaborative document for this session and for all of the other sessions today, which you'll find linked in the program. James has just dropped the program into the chat, so make sure you utilize that collaborative document if you've got any thoughts you want to share, and also if you want to keep in touch with other participants after this call is done. So Nitish is going to take the first 5 minutes of this chat just to set the scene. So we'll keep you all on mute for that time period, and then after that we're going to open up the discussion. We've got 20 people on the call at the moment, so we'll probably keep everyone in one room and have a discussion that way, I think. But if it gets any bigger, we might utilize some breakout rooms. But yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say for now, and we'll hand over to Nitish to get us started.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you.
Okay, that's great. Great. Kia ora, everybody. Look, I'll get straight to it. I'm very energized, and just being in a musical space before this event just got my heart beating, just got me settled in to this talk. I just want to acknowledge the depth of of emotion and intellect that has gone into this conference, and I want to start off with that. I want to just set the scene very quickly, and then get to an action in an area that is very unglamorous, which is reporting. It is like what I want to get to that point where what is frustrating us about reporting, and what is making us happy about reporting, or what will make us fall in love with it. And I want to use a bit of a framework to get us to the action. But first, let's set the scene. And why I'm passionate about this talk and for your involvement is that I believe that it is our regions, and it's for obvious reasons, that you take Gisborne or Gore or Invercargill, or we are talking about these places. We're not talking about just Wellington and Auckland. These places are going to feel the big brunt of the COVID crisis and the climate change impact. And we need to empower them, and we need to power our regions to tell our own story, and have the power to tell our own story the way we believe that should be told, not by a bank, not by a charity organization, not by a government organization, our whānau, our people, to be able to realize that thing that Stephen said, which is basically that what is our potential? What is that seed in the avocado that's going to grow for our future generations? What are our shared values that we value? And how are we going to take that place, our sense of place, our home, and tell that story? That is reporting. And that traditionally has been extremely hard. And this new economy, this new shift post-COVID is our opportunity, our 12-month opportunity to actually push this through and solve some of the hard problems. The hard problems with grassroots reporting from the ground up basically has negative implications, because it's very hard because of the transaction costs between different interest groups when it comes to Invercargill or Whangarei or Gisborne, or the small towns, the smaller towns, like, the really small towns. It's really, really hard. And it's not like people don't know. It is just the transaction cost of dealing with government or private sector is high. And then there is the cultural question and transaction costs across culture and across industries. Some industries dominate, construction sector dominates a particular place, or some other sector dominates a place, tourism sector dominates a place. And then there's a sense of technocracy, that somehow technical ideas will change everything. So these are the barriers, actually. And the barriers is the lack of connections between heart and mind in actually dealing with our place. And if we're able to deal with it, the benefits are transparency, trust, cooperation, more resources, more resilience, more prosperity, so that we have a sense of stewardship to our place. And as and that's where the investment, even if people write checks, even if government writes checks, to get that help to our land will need reporting, right? And I believe you all know this, and that's why you're here. So where I want to get to very quickly is to take a basic idea of the theory of change, which is basically whatever organizations you work in, whether it's a charity or a social enterprise or a corporation or a government department, what are the reporting challenges you have to demonstrate impact. And then I want to put in a bit of a prompt and say, let's take a recent example. So for our discussion, because we are going to be in this discussion, what is your recent experience with reporting, whether it's doing grant application or annual report or dealing with an auditor, accountant, whatever, or you're an accountant auditor and you have to deal with others. What are the gaps that you see? And one action that will empower you to make that impact. From a previous stream that we saw Fiona's discussion being that, it's very hard to act because converting an awareness into action requires knowing what we know and knowing what we don't know. And so therefore relationships are important. So the second prompt is to know what relationship will help you, empower you to actually make a change in reporting. So that is it from me. And I want to just make a shout out to people in the audience who I believe can help us with a lot of knowledge here. We have Ferdinand, who is my business partner, who's an impact expert. And we have Helene, who is a place-based expert in social enterprise. So welcome, Helene, and welcome, Ferdinand. So I throw the floor open for your discussion and your insights.
Okay. Is Helene, would Helene like to start off or?
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my background is I'm a chartered accountant and an auditor, and I've practiced that for 25 years globally at partner level, and then switched to sustainability. But sustainability was always my leitmotif, because my parents came from Holland to set up the first sewage treatment plant for Wellington in the early 1980s. So I've always lived with focus on the environment and kaitai kitangi, kitangi with a Dutch accent. And latterly I've been doing a lot of reporting, impact reporting, integrated reporting, trying to use that to raise grants and investments into green technologies. It's been very, very tough. And one of the challenges has been to find a harmonized, comparable set of metrics and frameworks that investors understand and subscribe to actually let the investment flow. Because on the one hand, there's lots of money available, increasingly for ESG, environmental, social, and governance type projects, but there's very little that comes through simply because people feel it's too risky or there's not enough incentive to do so. That's me for the moment. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Ferdinand. Did you want to jump in, Helene?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose like 3 points I'd probably would like to make on the back of what Nitish said. I feel personally extremely strongly about the importance of impact measuring and reporting, and I'm sure I'm not the only one here. But I think I've been thinking a lot in the last couple of years. It's very important for us to make the case for impact enterprise and social enterprise, because we've got a massive opportunity, even more than any time before right now, to actually raise our voice and make the case and prove the impact in a way that's tangible and relevant and convincing. So I think that's one point I'd like to make. Another one is that, so Nitish, you refer to theory of change, and I think right now as we're talking, Louise from the Ākina Foundation is running a session on theory of change, and it's one way of doing it. But I suppose the point I'd like to make is that there's lots of ways we can measure impact and report on it. And the most important thing for the practitioners is probably to find the right way for them, the way that's going to suit them. And I suppose my last point is around language and the importance of translating what you're doing in terms of positive change and impact, and the power of words, which in some cases, it's a skill. It's a strength, it's a talent, and we don't all have it. So it's important to reach out to those who can help with the language and the words that are going to resonate, so that it's accessible and easily, grasped by others and by as many people and sectors as possible.
Thank you, Helene. Certainly resonate with what you're saying there about finding a way to report that works for you and your organisation, and probably also along those lines, knowing who your audience is going to be, who you're actually appealing to in those communications and impact reports. If anyone would like to contribute at any stage, please just use the raise a hand function. So if you click participants down the bottom, you'll be able to select to raise your hand, and we can unmute you and invite you in to say your piece. I'd be interested to know if there's anyone here who has, found particular success in how their organisation or how they have approached reporting. To share those success stories would be helpful, I think.
Boys, I'm going to talk, so be quiet.
I'm not sure who that was.
I'm already
go for it. Go, Nicholas.
I've already been unmuted. Sorry, that's me yelling at my children in the background. Lucky it was not too bad. My question is really at a regional level scale, how we use potentially some existing measures or tools that will allow us to understand the impact of the wider change we're trying to drive. So I'm trying to access some resourcing to do, if you like, a local census or some sort of baseline research, so I can set what's already present in Whanganui. And because of the size of our community and our location, our wider regional stats are for Manawatu Whanganui, and we're really lost in that. And so I'm sort of hoping you might have ideas or directions that we can look at around how we establish what we already have, and then how we can measure over time the bigger, deeper impacts we have. There you go. That's just that little easy question.
Great. Can I invite Ferdinand to respond to that? Because it's Ferdinand could. That's the question that Libby asked about the work she's doing in Whanganui. How can she capture the wider scope from her in a regional context? Specific techniques.
Just before we jump into that, Nitish, would you mind stopping the screen share so that we can sort of interact a little bit more easily and see people? Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah.
Over to you, Ferdinand.
I was just about to write a note to Nitish as well.
Much easier. Yeah, you're right. That's much easier.
Much easier. Very quickly, I'm co-writing a book at Victoria about green budgeting at national level and green and ESG budgeting, basically, and monitoring and reporting. And we've looked at the wellbeing budget from Treasury, and we're very interested to see how that evolves in terms of pulling together all the data from the regions to bring it up into the national level to meet and ensure that we're on the right track for, say, Paris Agreement objectives and against UN SDG and so on. And I realize there's already some reporting out there, but it's about the integrated nature of it. And it comes back also to what you're asking is like, okay, so what do we define at a regional level, and what do we define then at individual organizational levels to report into that? So I don't have any immediate answers. It's just that I understand from all my research to date that there's not a lot of very defined metrics that fit in and lead and flow into what we would all like to see. The well-being budget is one example of an attempt at that, and New Zealand is very advanced in that. But yeah, I wonder if anybody else has some thoughts on this.
Libby, you've got your hand up. Did you want to contribute to that, or? Yeah. Sorry, just getting you unmuted. We're probably both trying to do the same thing at once. There you go.
I'm not an expert in this field. I'm just a beginning person in this field. But I like impact and all of the words that you were using in terms of reporting and metrics and all of that sort of stuff. It's like I have a reaction to that and I go, oh, ugh, because they're numbers and I'm not a numbers person. I work in different ways. And so have you heard about developmental evaluation? Anybody? And what do you think of that? There are a whole lot of ways to measure the impact of small, medium and large organisations that don't just rely on the number aspect of measuring impact. They rely on, for example, using people's stories and telling people's stories. But that's just one item. There's a whole range, there's masses and masses of resources out there on developmental evaluation, and it's really good for emergent, complex situations, quite like what we find ourselves in right now in COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes. Can I jump in? I mean, I'm just wanting to just reinforce Libby's point, though, because the whole purpose of the point I was making about the storytelling, what story do we tell, is not a number story. It is a qualitative understanding of self and development. I have come across this in United Nations evaluations, in development evaluations, and it is very much being reinforced in a Te Maori context, which is part of my slide, because the relational quality is about relationships more than numbers, has always been part of indigenous knowledge across the world. So in my discussion with Honorable Robertson, we had a very extensive discussion on that qualitative understanding of well-being framework, because the OECD is a very Pakeha concept, or even a European concept. And so there is a lot of work being discussed on that, exactly. So just wanted to say more, absolutely that's the direction that you're setting, is where the discussion should lead. And I just want to say in the page 2, which was the action page, is about the heart and mind, is saying what is the relationship that you would value that will help you support that shift that you talked about, storytelling. That is what the second page is for, because in the day, relationship.
Thank you. Caitlin, you've had your virtual hand raised for a while. Over to you.
Everyone's points are extremely interesting, and it sort of makes me think about the indicators that are being developed to measure the living standard framework. And so some of those, indicators a sense of belonging. So I don't think they have yet figured out how to measure that, but it is very reassuring to see that they're trying to find ways to capture something that is very important to everybody's life and has been completely overlooked for however long we have been talking about sort of helping people. I have actually worked on a project, so in terms of, I think it was Nicola asked if anyone had a case study. I do have a case study. I did some work. I work for a company called Frank Advice, a little consultancy in Wellington, and we were very fortunate enough to align ourselves with a government agency and supported them to develop a place-based measurement framework that fed up to the living standard frameworks. And so basically how it worked was each region, we went and talked to them, asked them, what do you care about? What is valuable to your community? What are the things that you want to see your children come out of the education system with? They told us a whole bunch of different things. We then themed them, and then we would use those themes and scour through nearly lots of data sets to find which measures could you say, and usually there was a whole group of measures that would link to one value. So if you care about family and school connection, what are the whole suite of measures that are publicly available that you could use? Then sort of, it's a process of elimination almost, and then you start with a bigger list and you kind of refine it down and down and down. But the end result was that community schools were able to use a framework in which they could say we impact on these living standard framework outcomes because we have a measurement framework that takes us sort of piecemeals it all together. But it was totally that point of, it was a translation exercise. Everybody was right. It was just trying to find the same language to bring the narrative all together. And it definitely is a skill. One I have seen a few people really master, but it's definitely something that I think gets overlooked a little bit, how important it is to create a narrative around the change in people's lives, not just a number.
Precisely. Thank you for that.
And maybe jumping in there, if you don't mind, building on to what you've just said, Kathleen, you know, some regions have developed their own regional, equivalent of a regional, well-being framework.
Yeah.
So Waikato has the well-being project, and Nelson Tasman has their, I think they call it Intergenerational Strategy, which I believe is their take on the living standard framework. So asking what well-being looks like for their own communities. So I would love to see more regions taking the lead to develop as well. There's someone from Nelson on the line, actually, no? Someone typed Nelson, I think. I don't know if they know anything about it.
Nettie, she said she's from Nelson.
I've just unmuted you, Nettie, if you wanted to say anything.
I was trying to do the same thing. It was an awesome initiative. They it was led by Wakatu, which is one of the iwi-based corporations, and also represents iwi in the region. And they, across Te Tauihu, so it was a Te Tauihu intergenerational strategy, and the point of it was that I guess it pulled in the whole region. And so where we live, when people say region, it can mean Nelson City, it can mean Nelson Tasman, but this was Nelson Tasman, Marlborough, and the top part of Canterbury. And they held meetings in marae, in schools, they did online stuff, they did everything to connect to everybody that they could, and did it in quite a funky way that brought quite a lot of young people in. And I don't know, I can't really say there's been results yet. They've only just produced a draft strategy, and the idea is that that would be taken forward and people would work out how they might help deliver some of the things in that strategy. But as far as I'm aware, it's still a suggested draft strategy with suggested priorities for the region.
Thanks, Nettie. We're just short on time, so I'll cross over to Daniel for our last sort of contribution or question.
Okay, I'll just quickly, I do a lot of work in impact reporting at the Crown Research Institute level and previously at university level. So that's relating to the research that has been produced. I just wanted to point to the Ministry for Business Innovation and Employment's results chain framework, which you should all be able to access free online, and it provides much similar to what you've provided there, Nitish, about this results chain of these are the things that go into providing an impact, a demonstrable change to society. I think your point about evidence, I guess thinking about when you're talking about impact, you're talking about demonstrating impact to an audience ultimately. And so we need to not lose sight of that audience while numbers quantify and provide evidence of a sort towards that audience. We also have to compel them with a narrative. We have to put it to them in a way that they can consume and that will motivate them to believing that we're actually making a difference, whether at regional level, organizational level, national level, global level with the UN SDGs. So narratives are absolutely critical, and in the world of impact assessment, the gold standard is still case studies. So that's what I wanted to add in there.
Great, thank you, Daniel. I just wanted to thank every one of you for your deep insights, and I wanted to just end with a wish because you obviously have so much of knowledge and intellect in this area, and it is like, what's frustrating you? What, because of the demand of the next 12 months is so high, and so many lives are being affected. I wanted to bring that into this room, because that relationship, that stuff that could be valuable to someone you don't know. And so which person would you reach out and find out, and how they could know from you and you can know from them, is perhaps my wish for that worksheet, for you to reflect on. If we can help you connect, we do that. Or there are others in this conference I've met who just specialize in this impact leadership area. So I wish an action from you that is through relationship.
Thanks, Nitish. And the way that people can do that is just by jumping into that collaborative document. It's going to stay in existence, so don't worry about having to get in there right now. But the sooner the better, because I know taking action is always good to do in the moment when it's fresh. What we'll do is add a couple of extra columns to that table up the top of the document. So you can say perhaps what your strengths are in this space and what you're looking for help with. And that's a way that you can sort of interact to help each other. I can see there's been a question in there from Nettie asking if anyone has a good example of a written report, an impact report. That's exactly the kind of resource we'd love to see links dropped into that collaborative document, so you can all access it afterwards. This is all about sharing and being open to the greatest extent you feel willing and able to be. Yeah. Ferdinand, did you have something you wanted to add there? Oh.
Yes, just yes, I do have some examples of what we prepared, which have metrics and narratives. It's really great actually coming out with the numbers thing and then getting the feedback, because yes, the narratives are absolutely critical. And I've prepared reports for the London Social Stock Exchange to get membership for social enterprises and so on for them, and that is both narrative and indicators. So I'm quite happy to share that with you through this document.
Thank you, Ferdinand. Thank you so much. Just looking through those last comments. Thank you, everyone, really, for just engaging and sharing so openly. This has been a really great interactive session. Please do keep riffing off each other and helping each other out through that document and connect. I'd encourage you, if you find someone from this group who can help you out, just set up a Zoom call sometime next week. Keep the connections going while they're fresh. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Nitish.